to the action and start a Haydock with the Betfair Chase. And it's been a topsy and turning in terms of the field, but we eventually have 4 here. Braveman's Game does go here, despite what Twitter would have told you during the week, even though Paul Nicholls insisted he was going pretty much regardless. But Braveman's Game is 1.8 with Daryl Jacob on board. Protector at 3.0, Royal Guy 10.0, and Cork Rambler 11.0. Just given I've looked ahead to the other bets in the dock, I feel you're probably strongest on this race. So if you want to maybe kick off your thoughts.
Yeah, you're right, Dan. I mean, this race has turned upside down, hasn't it, in the space of 5 days? You're a kind of 9.0 Braveman's Game this time last week, odds on Protector at. And then, all sorts of shenanigans. Daryl Jacob, in the twilight of his career, getting called up. I'm sure he won't mind me saying that, Daryl. I'm sure he can't believe what's going on, being able to sit on the King George winner, the Gold Cup runner-up in a race which, let's be blunt, a little strength and depth to it. You've got the Grand National win in there, Cork Rambler, who on ratings got a stone to find, and I just wonder whether on drying ground round here he'll have the legs. You've got Royal Pagaille rising 10, who seems to save his best for an absolute swamp, and for all he's got good course form. He's only had 1 win in the last nearly 3 years, so that's got to be at a bit of an alarm bell. And then you've got Protector at, obviously is the defending champion. And twofold issue with Protector at is obviously this taunted Dan Skelton stat at the moment, with his individuals returning first time out for the season are operating around 9%, where usually he gets them touching 20% for a strike rate first time out. So the yard as a whole are kind of well down on where they usually are in terms of the trends. And also the ground would be flip-flopping. We used to Haydock Demai, or Bristol, as we used to call him, swamping it round in the mud. Daryl Jacob, funnily enough, about 8 pairs of goggles on, looking around for danger as well. Yeah, I can't believe it. In the Costa del Northwest, pretty much 3.5 days of dry weather are pretty much set to continue. And we've got a blend of good to soft and around good to soft and a few soft patches, looking at the latest course bulletin, with a dry day forecast Saturday. So the whole rate, it's a convoluted way of saying it. It's amazing how quickly everything does change in the space of 3 or 4 days. And it leads me to Braveman's Game, really. I think it's got everything has swung in his favour. He's been here once, bolted up once. The drying ground making this less of a brutal stamina test, I think, has definitely got to be in his favour. On ratings, he's got upwards of £6 in hand of these. You have to respect Protector. He's the defending champion, but if you could have offered them heavy ground and the yard going a bit better, they would have been 2 major ticks in the right boxes. Just on a side point, I am still just personal conjecture. I find it baffling Harry Cobden's not on board. I can't believe for the life of me Nico de Boinville won't sit on Constitution Hill at Newcastle when he's going to have 7 good horses, including graded races running at Newbury. Ruby Walsh used to go to Haydock just to ride Corto Star. When I was going back through the 2010 planner, there were multiple Nicholls horses, including Masterminded, running at Ascot that day. A whole host of other horses went on the winning graded races. Ruby went to Haydock just to ride the Star. Now, maybe you could argue, obviously, Braveman's Game's not quite that level, but he's the highest rated horse in the yard. He's the defending King George winner. This is a grade 1, and your stable jockey's not on board. Personally, I find it all a bit flummoxing. But that aside, I think everything's in place for a big run. And I think the market has now corrected itself naturally. And I'd be disappointed if he was beaten.
Yeah, Dan, I might go to you a little bit on the jockey, I guess. Were you shocked about it? It sort of livened up there Monday. It must have been Monday or Tuesday when it broke on Twitter, because it was quite enough days racing apart from that, but it really just took off. And Paul Nicholls, not that he took exception to being asked by the Racing TV interviewer, but I think it was maybe the follow-up question. He's trying his best to say, people are saying, I think it was a completely legitimate question to ask. And I agree with Ed that if you're the best jockey in the yard, you want to be on the best horse.
Yeah, it was an interesting one. I guess I think what's probably happened there is, by all accounts, I think Pic Dory is meant to go to the Charlie Hall initially, with Braveman's going straight here. Then obviously that plan's been rerouted, so he's ended up going to Ascot instead for his seasonal reappearance. And you imagine there's been some kind of discussion there with the owners of Pic Dory, like Johnny Delahaye, saying, look, we're going to make sure Harry's on him for the Ascot race, as kind of a way of letting Braveman's Game take his place in the Charlie Hall. Maybe that's something that's gone on there. Like, obviously, it was quite funny how everyone was getting quite worked up about it all. Like, it was, and Paul's response to it was pretty much typical Paul Nicholls. I guess maybe some people took exception to the fact that maybe it's an outside ride, and why is Bryony, why is Lorcan not getting that opportunity? Which I think is a valid enough point. If you're going to have a second in your yard, probably the time to use her. But I guess that would be the main point of conjecture I had in mind. But it certainly did make for an interesting start to the week, and it really got people going, it seemed.
Yeah, it was fascinating. A little bit to you, Charlie, maybe more so on the skeleton form, because as someone who would tend to black skeleton at the start of the season, like most people, I think that quickly became apparent there. They've had a slow start to the season. Is that like, how does a yard figure out what's gone wrong there? Is it going to be something so simple, or is it the case that maybe just these things happen depending on the time of year?
I mean, I think both of those things. I mean, how do they figure it out? Or maybe it is just one of those things. The sort of, I mean, I think the weather probably has been difficult for yards. You know, the temperature is jumping around a lot at the moment. You know, it's not easy for horses to regulate themselves. It's probably quite a sort of heady cocktail of an atmosphere to create low-grade viruses and stuff. So whether there's something like that going on, I don't know. I know it would be a major issue for Dan and Harry. There'd be something that they'd be very frustrated about. I think you got that impression even in the interviews that he did. And you know, he can keep saying that Protectorat's absolute and he's 110%. And I'm sure from a prep point of view, he is. But there's no doubt it has to be a concern, doesn't it, for going into a big race like this? Like, this is Protectorat's Gold Cup. And really, if he doesn't win this, it's hard to see which big race he's going to win later in the season, Dan, I would say. Yeah,
it's fascinating that plays out. Dan, for you, you're looking at Braveman's game for a bet here as well. How strong compared to Ed would you be in terms of, would you be having a bet, or is it more a case that you're just putting up the horse?
I probably won't have a bet in the race. I wouldn't be as strong as Ed is, but I do think he's by far and away the most likely winner. I think when you look at this with a view to the future season, I think this is actually quite smart from Paul to run here. You're realistically speaking, he's not going to get an easier grade 1 to run in for the rest of the season. And if he didn't run here, it would just be straight to the King George, into a Gold Cup. He'd probably run well in the Gold Cup again, but I think it's pretty obvious that it's not his ideal track, and there's probably going to be the likes of Galopin Des Champs, maybe another stronger stayer in Jerry Colombe that's going to find that test too appropriate. So I think it's wise to come here, and it isn't exactly unprecedented either. Like Silvio Conti finished 5th in the Charlie Hall, went on to win his Betfair Chase, I think that was 2014. So it isn't completely out of the realms of possibility. And obviously then Conti went on to win the King George as well. I think it's reasonably smart planning. And I think it all kind of comes back to, I think when Braveman's Game was a novice, there was this idea that he was still a weak horse. And even towards the start of last season, Paul Nicholls alluded to the fact that going up the gallops, he didn't want to go, he couldn't really go round again. He was kind of there, and he just really didn't kind of go through with it. Very talented, but maybe not the strongest. I think now they've got the complete full strength Braveman's Game. So while they're there, while he's kind of in form and while he's fit, you just got to take these opportunities as they go. He's going to have his break after the King George anyway, and this just seems a winnable opportunity. Like, he is a better horse than Protectorat, and the other two, I think, have a fair bit to find. So I think it's quite sensible race planning. And for all that I don't think he's necessarily finds the most for pressure early in the season, I think he will in the King George. I'm not sure he's going to be 100% for this. I think whatever version of Braveman's Game turns up, if it's 95%, I still think that's good enough to win.
Okay, yeah, that's Braveman's Game for Ed and Dan. Charlie, incidentally, is going for Royal Beguile.